but I live here now. Are you
Do you
guys
find people more unconnected here, disconnected here? Because I think Vancouver's like the worst place in Canada, from what I've heard.
That's actually the question.
Yeah.
Oh,
That's how really funny,
I grew up
actually.
here, and I totally agree with that statement.
Really?
Yep.
Okay, so tell me about that.
So last year, in October of 2018, I moved to Vancouver. And since I've moved here, I've heard something repeatedly from the people that I talk to. And that's that Vancouver is an incredibly unfriendly place to live. As this channel is all about human connection, I really wanted to dive into this and do a little bit more research on the idea. After doing a quick search, I found multiple articles that talked about Vancouver being one of, or the loneliest city in Canada. In 2012, the Vancouver Foundation did a survey that found social isolation as the city's most pressing problem. In total, 3,841 people were surveyed, and of that, over 80 ethnic groups were represented. 1/3 of the people said it's difficult to make friends here, and 1/4 of people said that they were alone more often than they'd like to be. These are just two findings that I'm highlighting though, but the entire survey goes quite in depth on the idea of personal friendships, connections to one's neighborhood, and the larger community of Vancouver as a whole. So if you want to find out a little bit more, I'd highly recommend reading the article. Most recently, in August of 2019, the Daily Hive covered a story on an article by the travel website Big 7 that stated Vancouver was the friendliest city in the world according to a survey that they recently conducted. Yet the very next day the Daily Hive covered that story, they posted this article. Residents of Vancouver took to the internet to share their opinions of disagreement. This is just one perspective on the city, so I decided to go into the city myself and get the public's opinion on this idea.
I've been living here for about a year now, and something that I've noticed a lot with people is that people say it's really hard to make friends in Vancouver, and it's actually been called one of the loneliest cities to live in Canada. And I wanted to get your opinion on that. Like, what do you think about Vancouver being the loneliest city?
I think that's pretty true, honestly. Like, I find, especially just around the city, people are like really to themselves and independent. I don't know why that is really here. I just definitely notice it's a trend for sure. Compared to like New York or Toronto, people are a lot more open and friendly, but Vancouver's kind of reserved. And I think it comes with the whole like, I don't know, the whole healthy lifestyle people have here. It's just, I don't know, it's a very independent city.
It does talk about that.
So you
Thought I had a good time.
Yeah, no way.
I forget what the context
Well,
was.
someone reaching out to me because they saw that I was in Vancouver,
Yeah.
and they're like, and she was saying that they're probably lonely because it's hard to meet people here.
We're from the East Coast, so all my friends here are from the East Coast. I don't have one friend from Vancouver. So I think it would be hard if you came here not knowing anyone. Like, I would be screwed. So.
And I feel like people from back home is like, the friend groups are very welcoming. You bring them once, and then like your friends will just interact with them and then invite them out afterwards and stuff. And I don't know if Vancouver's a little bit different than that. But.
Yeah, I don't know. It's like people have their own like friend groups. I don't really want to like
branch out.
Yeah, I was actually telling my friends yesterday that I think I'm like a meaner person since I've got here. Just because like, I don't know, like when you're driving, like no one lets you in. Like, you know what I mean? Like it doesn't have that, like when you're in the East Coast, like it's like you're in a car, but you're still like, oh, I'll let that person in even though I can't see them and I'm never gonna see them again. But it's just like the mentality where everyone's helping each other out, and here it's like, cut everyone off, and like it's just
car horns
different.
are very rare back home. You don't hear it nearly as much as out here, everyone's honking at each other.
I remember when I first moved here over a year ago, like I said, I definitely had a hard time and I felt super isolated for a really long time, especially because I lived in Yaletown at the beginning. It's like a concrete jungle, right? So I thought it was really bizarre. No one makes eye contact, and it was really different for me from living in Victoria when people smile at each other in the streets. And then I moved to Vancouver and I was like, how come no one's looking at each other anymore? Lucky enough, we met here, so it's not as bad as people might say.
It's kind of one of those things that, like, if you're not from around here, you're kind of the one that has to initiate it first. Otherwise, you're just gonna pass by a bunch of people and not really like meet anybody new. It's like you want something, but no one actually like takes initiative to start it.
I've lived here my whole life, so I kind of know the feeling.
What do you do in your life in Vancouver to deal with that?
That's a good question. I haven't really, I think I just kind of stay lonely at the moment. I think of ways, like what are the ways, we could improve maybe. I think maybe there needs to be more groups that, networking events is all right, but how do you follow up in such a busy city, right? Like, how do you follow up the connections you make to call and develop new friendships and relationships.
In the past 2 years I'm here, I've met wonderful people, and connecting with them, knowing their culture and stuff like that made my life wonderful here. I am happy living here in Vancouver, and I've been to other places, but I like more here compared to other places because it's multiracial, so you get to know different kinds of people. I can go and talk to anybody in there. People are friendly in there. They say hi. If I'm lost, I go ask people. They have guided me there. So it's definitely a good place to stay with.
Well, it's probably big with the social media as well, right? So now people can always be connected, but it's not an emotional connection. It's just purely like you see what they're doing. And so that makes people think that they need this connection more. Whereas throughout history, it's like you have to dedicate time for a phone call or something, or you're writing someone a letter and you just don't have the constant reminder that you're alone.
Have you found your community? Have you found like your friends here? Like, how has that been for you? What was that process like?
That guy is also, I'm originally from Saskatchewan. He was also from Saskatchewan. I met him at Popeyes. I bought protein powder from him. And he was like, oh, you're from Saskatchewan because of my phone number. And we are now doing our second play together.
No way.
So maybe that says it, you know? Vancouver is a very friendly city and you can find those connections, in my experience.
Well, I feel like Canada in general is like so multicultural that everybody kind of gets segregated in their own little thing, right? So it's like you don't really talk to people on the train or like walk down the street. It's kind of awkward to go up and talk to somebody. Like you could, but it's kind of weird, you know what I mean?
Also, I feel like people are surrounded by like their own kind of lives, their own things, like social media and all that. So that's another thing to separate us.
I don't know, I feel like human connection could be better, but at the same time, it's just like to what end, right? Like what's that going to accomplish? There's so many different issues in the world that it's hard to pinpoint one thing and say we should focus on that thing as opposed to something else, right? I don't know, I'm not entirely sure.
I think you hear that about every place. Like, I don't think I've ever talked to someone who was like, oh yeah, it's super easy to meet people where I live. We're going to get to a place that we're leading to now, but right now there's this awkward kind of middle ground where we have all this technology that's brand new to us. We have social media, which is new to us, and we're all trying to figure out how to integrate that healthily into a social life. And so I think a lot of the time what people perceive as a difficulty to connect is really that everybody's just kind of got their head on backwards and we're trying to like figure out how to live our lives. It's all about figuring out the kinds of social connection that you need to be like healthy and comfortable and happy. The real work isn't like we all need to connect more or better. It's like we all need to do some inner thinking and figure out what we need and then get better at expressing those needs and expressing our boundaries and like finding ways to connect with other people who need the same stuff.
I mean, the reality in here is that the rent alone, it takes a lot of chunk from your money. You need a place to stay, so you gotta work. When you have kids, it's even worse because now you have to make the extra money or the extra hours just to live in this place. So money is not enough. Every year the rent goes up, and that's the cruel reality that it's either friends or the rent. So I choose the rent, so that means I have to work extra hours.
Yeah,
that's the reality.
But I live here now. Are you guys?
Do you find people more unconnected here, disconnected here? Because I think Vancouver's like the worst place in Canada, from what I've heard.
That's actually the question.
Yeah.
Oh,
that's how really.
I grew up here, and I totally agree with that statement.
Really? Yep. Okay, so tell me about that.
I think it's two things. One is immigration, because I have nothing against whatever X culture. I don't care if you're white or brown or green, but you have to have certain things that you connect over.
I draw the line of green.
I don't. I'm a little bit more accepting than you. I'm a better Canadian.
You know.
But I think you have to have some point of connection. So whether it used to be religion when people were really religious, or you have like in some cultures, like say Mexico, you have like a strong patriotism. So you've got everybody banding around, this is our country, rah, rah, rah. You know, at the very least, you have to have language. But if you take language out of the picture and you say everybody can speak whatever language, you don't even have a common language. People have nothing, no way to connect over. And I don't care what language it is. I mean, personally, I prefer Spanish to English. It's much more beautiful. But I'd be against encouraging people to speak Spanish because it creates clusters of people that can't interact with each other. It is like a divide and conquer strategy. You know, so you look at like, if you look at the left, right? It's constantly this constant refrain of identity politics that's just geared at stop dividing people into all these separate groups. So the whites hate the blacks, and the gays hate the straights, and the straights hate the like yellows and the yellows hate the browns. Everybody's separated into like 500 different groups that can't communicate with each other. All these people have lost the ability to connect with anybody. So they're a bunch of sheep. They're very easy to lead because none of them communicate with each other. And it's natural, it's not their fault, it's just
the way it is.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I feel it's a very lonely city, morbidly depressing. I think we need to improve the city quite a bit. The one thing here that I've noticed from the prairies is there was a lot of socials that people used to have for weddings and hockey socials, where you go into a community center and meet people and buy tickets for 15, 20 bucks and you can drink there and have food and support the people. But, you know, there's really no connection. There's no jazz bars, there's no music bars. There's nothing. There's no area in the city for artistic type endeavors or artists. I remember we used to have it on Commercial Street, but the rents have gone up. Even Yaletown here, like when you look around, half the stores are closing down.
Vancouver is very polite, you know, a lot of smiles, but when it comes to connecting and actually going that mile and not bailing, things like that, it isn't, it's not the greatest for that. Something that I worry about with Vancouver is, in terms of changing this, is a lot of people who are different and who are, you know, people that you can genuinely connect with don't find the connections here, so they leave. And so you're just kind of recycling the same issue, and it'll be a bold statement to maybe say, have people, you know, wait it out a little bit, as opposed to being like, hey, you know what, this is not it for me, I'm out type of thing. I think that way we can cultivate that type of personality, like a city change, like a real personality change for the city, but the personality are the people. So if those people with the personalities leave, the city stays the same. The first step is actually sticking it through and kind of not giving up and not changing and becoming like what you're trying to change. And to be honest, I think that Vancouver has some people like that, like more than we might think, but it's connecting them together. Like you're saying, that connection is like, where are they and where do they hang out and how do we, like entrepreneurs and things like that. Like a lot of my friends are within those fields, but it came over time. So I do believe that is here, is just where to find it, you know?
I definitely don't think it's lonely, but I'm biased because born and raised here, so I have a very good network, and I mean, I'm blessed that I've got my family and friends and whatnot here. But for somebody new to come into the city, I can 100% appreciate it for a few reasons. One is because, first and foremost, you got to pay to play. Like, things cost you money here. Nothing in Vancouver, unless you're lucky enough to live in the downtown core and kind of walk to things, we don't have the infrastructure to kind of enable us to just come and go to areas that are fun, because buses only go a certain place, a SkyTrain only runs to a certain hour, and then places like this cost you quite a bit of money to operate in. So I appreciate why somebody would think it's lonely, because it's, you know, you got to put yourself in a position to meet people, and we also have just a lot less to do. When you have a lot less to do, you focus kind of on yourself. I mean, when I think about places like Toronto and I think about places like Montreal, they have a lot more culture than we do here. And so I don't know if that has something to do with it, but we're pretty self-absorbed in Vancouver. And I think that I wish I could quantify it, but I don't actually know why we are the way we are. But Vancouverites are some of the most laid-back, nicest people. And I think that we all need an opportunity or a forum to get to know one another a bit better.
I would disagree. I mean, I have family in Europe, and to be honest, people in Europe are way less friendly than Vancouver. I think everybody here is warm. I think everybody here is open to conversation. Yeah, it might be hard at the beginning to crack the person's initial shield, but all in all, I've had good experiences. I mean, just me doing this with you right now shows that we can actually still connect and still talk, right? So I would disagree with that statement.
Cool. Perfect. Thank you, dude. I appreciate it. Yeah, it's great.
Obviously, this video doesn't reflect Vancouver as a whole, as I only interviewed a handful of people. But all in all, there was great insight on both sides, and I learned a lot from talking to everyone. I think the thing that I want to take away from this is that I don't think people are necessarily unfriendly in Vancouver or any city. I think that we all want to connect with each other. The problem is we've just forgotten how to do that. Personally, I think the human connection is a skill, and it's a skill that we've forgotten the ability to use, and we're not educated on how to connect with people anymore. The thing is, there's so many people who genuinely feel alone and disconnected in this city, and many other cities around the world, but it doesn't have to be that way. I think Vancouver has the potential to be one of the most incredible cities in the world, and we can be that change. So if you're from Vancouver, I'd love to know your thoughts on this subject in the comments. And if you're not from Vancouver, where are you from? And do you feel the same disconnection and loneliness in your city? What are your thoughts? And as always, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next video.